Welcome to the Economic Bulletin. We start off with the United States, where the National Association of Realtors has reported that the existing home sales fell from more than expected in June, dropping 2.7% to a rate of 3.93 million units. The decline signals a deepening housing market slump as high mortgage rates, hovering just under 7%, keep potential buyers on the sidelines. The association attributes the sluggish sales to these elevated rates, while the median homes price hit a record of $435,300. The supply of homes increased and properties are staying on the market longer. Reuters has reported that the U.S.-funded contraceptives worth nearly $10 million are being sent to France from Belgium to be incinerated after Washington rejected offers from the United Nations and family planning organizations to buy or ship the supplies to poor nations. It added that the United States government will spend $160,000 to incinerate the stocks at a facility in France that handles medical waste. The Belgian Foreign Ministry stated that it had held talks with U.S. authorities and explored all possible options to prevent the destruction, including temporary relocation. U.S. President Donald Trump has stated that his administration is considering eliminating capital gain tax on houses. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office, Trump stated that they wouldn't need to take such action if the Fed lowered interest rates. However, Republican Representative interpreted Trump's comments as a show of support for a bill she has proposed called the No Tax on Home Sales Act.
We're setting records at levels that nobody's ever seen before. But you know what? People aren't able to buy a house because...
Moreover, U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that he would use import restrictions to force foreign suppliers to cut drug prices, and that pharmaceutical companies would have a lot of problems if they did not agree to bring prices down.
We're going to get the drug prices down, not 30 or 40%, which would be great, not 50 or 60. No, we're going to get them down 1,000%, 600%, 500%, 1,500%. So I invoked what's called a favored nations provision so that we will pay the same price as the lowest nation anywhere in the world. And drugs will come down like from, as an example, $1,300 in the case I gave you. They'll come down from $1,300. Now, in the world, they'll go up a little bit. Not as much as you think, because the world is bigger than the United States in terms of population, as you probably know. But it will go up. And maybe it'll go up instead of $88 or $90, it will go up to $110 or $120 or $140. But we're going to come down to $140. So you're going to have it coming down from $1,300 to $140, $150, $160. What difference? I mean, somewhere big.
Federal Reserve Vice Chair for Supervision Michelle Bowman emphasized the very important need for a central bank to set monetary policy without political interference. Bowman asserted that while independence is crucial, it comes with an obligation for transparency and accountability. She also highlighted the need for the Fed to listen to a broad range of voices to inform its monetary policy decisions. Bowman's remarks came as President Donald Trump has escalated his criticism of the Fed and Chair Jerome Powell for not lowering interest rates as he desires.
Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully take office of President of the United States.
Capitol open the American and reciprocity.
Mexico, Canada,
Greenland.
Also, and I don't.
U.S. President Donald Trump reaffirmed his strategy of using tariffs as a tool to compel major countries to open their markets to U.S. goods. He stated that he is always willing to lower tariffs if reciprocal market access is granted to the United States. Trump emphasized that without tariffs, it would be impossible to get countries to open up, reiterating his ultimatum goal of always zero tariffs to America. This statement follows his recent announcements of new trade deals with Japan and Indonesia, which he credited to his tariff-based negotiation approach. President Donald Trump has announced new trade agreements with Japan and the Philippines and Indonesia. The deal with Japan includes a 15% U.S. tariff on Japanese goods, with Japan investing $550 billion in the U.S., from which the United States claims 90% of the profits. For the Philippines, Trump stated they will open their market to U.S. goods with zero tariffs, while the United States will impose a 19% tariff on Filipino imports. With Indonesia, the White House confirmed Indonesia will eliminate roughly 99% of tariff barriers for the United States industrial and agriculture products, while the United States will apply a 19% tariff on Indonesian imports. Indonesia will also remove restrictions on critical mineral exports to the United States. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has lauded the new trade agreement with the United States that will immediately reduce tariffs on Japanese automobiles from 25% to 15%. For his part, Filipino President has hailed his country's trade deal with the United States as a significant achievement. The deal set a 19% tariff rate on the country's export to America. This was just under the 20% tariff Trump had threatened earlier in the month, but still higher than 17% rate established in April. U.S. President Donald Trump also announced a concluded trade deal with the Philippines, noting that very big numbers in the trade agreement would only grow larger.
However, when you put it in real terms, it is a significant achievement.
So I just want to say it's an honor to have you. We're going to talk about trade today, and we're very close to finishing a trade deal, big trade deal actually, and we do a lot of business with you. It's a lot of Ferdinand.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has lauded the new trade agreement with the United States that will immediately reduce tariffs on Japanese automobiles from 25% to 15%.
自動車及び自動車部品について、本年4月以降に課された 25% の追加関税率を半減し、既存の税率を含め 15% とすることで合意をいたしました。世界に先駆け、数量制限のない自動車 25% まで引き上げるとされていた日本の関税率を 15% にとどめることができました。これは対米貿易黒字を抱える国の中でこれまでで最も低い数字となるものであります。私とトランプ大統領との間で今般の合意の実施に努めるとともに、経済のみならず、あらゆる分野での日米関係をさらに発展をさせ、自由で開かれたインド太平洋の実現に向けて、さらに取り組んでまいります。
For further analysis, we are joined from Tokyo by non-resident fellow at Hudson Institute, Dr. Satoru Nago. Welcome to Qnews Economic Bulletin, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. Sir, what are the key provisions of the recent U.S.-Japan trade deal And how do they differ from previous agreements between the two countries?
Different is, firstly, most importantly, during the negotiation, Japanese company cannot set up the long-term strategy, long-term policy to export and import of the production. So that's why this is very good timing to set up the long-term strategy for Japanese company. That is most important achievement. In the previous agreement, there are many agreements, but such kind of the uncertainty is very rare. So this time, without agreement, the Japanese government, Japanese companies cannot set up the long-term strategy. So that is most important difference. 25%, 50%, or other percentage, indeed, this is another matter, but at the same time, even if there any percentage, without a plan, Japanese company cannot continue business. So that's why this timing is very important turning point. That is most biggest difference in this agreement.
The trade deal stipulates a 15% reciprocal tariff on Japanese exports to the United States, down from a threatened 25% rate. What impact is this expected to have on critical sectors such as Japan's automotive and electronics industries, of course, which of course is a very important part of Japan's economy?
Of
and
course,
industry as well.
Yes, of course, when the Japan exports a product, the price will rise in the United States. So that's why for the customer in the United States, they cannot buy the Japanese product without paying this tariff. So that's why when we check the competition...
Pay the tax tariff, sorry sir to interrupt you, but you mean pay the tax tariff in Japan?
No. When the US customer try to buy the Japanese car or Japanese product, they need to pay additional money because when the US imports the Japanese products, they need to pay the money. This means that the price of the product will increase. So when we check the competition with the other product made in US or made in other country, this price is a very important factor. The customer decide whether buy or not. So that's why, view from the competition, this is disadvantage for the Japanese company. But at the same time, 15% is better than the 25%.
Okay, got your point, sir. Sir, as part of the agreement, Japan has committed to $550 billion in investments in the United States. What are the main strategic motivations behind this investment package, and how might it affect the Japanese economy's domestic growth prospects?
Indeed, the motivation of this investment is two. One is, of course, getting more money as a business, but another one is indeed security. Japan relies on the market in China, and Japan wants to strengthen the U.S. market as a counter value against the Chinese market.
Why,
because
sir?
China,
Why?
Because China is a threat against Japan now.
The Chinese is doing what against Japan?
Yes, of course, militarily, of course. And at the same time, China is using the economy as a weapon.
Okay,
Since the Trump administration sworn in, the people talk about tariff. So it looks like U.S. is using the economy as a weapon. But that's not exactly true. View from Japan, for a long time, China has used the economy as a weapon because Japanese company want to get a benefit in the Chinese market. That's why China sometimes China try to restrict rare earths to Japan, and currently they are doing, and try to delay the process to import. These were the methods as a economic sanction.
Okay,
So
sir,
that's
given current projections of modest economic growth and persistent inflation in Japan, how might the trade deal shape the Bank of Japan's policy decisions regarding interest rates and broader monetary policy, sir?
Because the Japanese company need to pay, they face the damage. In this case, the Japanese government try to prepare the money to support them. That will happen, I think. So in this case, Japanese government need to prepare something policy to support Japanese company to survive in the U.S. market. That is matter as a next step. Currently, without a rule, what kind of policy Japanese government choose was unclear. But agreement has happened. From now, Japanese government both identify what is the problem. So how to solve is the matter as a next step. In this case, Japanese government try to prepare the budget to support Japanese company. That will be the next step.
From Tokyo, that was a non-resident fellow at Hudson Institute, Dr. Satoru Nagao. Thank you very much for joining us in Q Channel, sir. And it's a pleasure, of course, to have you with us. And thank you very much for your informative knowledge. Back to our news, and still on the tariff policy, as Brazilian President Luiz Lula da Silva has warned that a tariff war could erupt if the United States imposes its threatened 50% tariff on Brazilian imports starting August the 1st. Lula stated Brazil will take reciprocal actions if negotiations fall. He also urged that the United States' reasoning for the tariffs is flawed, as Brazil has had a $410 billion trade deficit with the U.S. over the past 15 years. Lula reiterated Brazil's intention to take reciprocal measures if negotiations fail to resolve the issue. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Jiu Jaikon had stated that China has always advocated resolving trade and economic differences, though equal-footed dialogue and consultations. He added that China hopes to build more consensus and reduce misunderstanding with the United States via ongoing dialogue, thereby enhancing the China-US economic and trade consultation mechanism. He also highlighted that Washington's withdrawal from UNESCO was not the behavior expected of a responsible major country, and reiterated China's firm backing of UNESCO's work.
中方一贯主张各方通过平等对话协商。
China's Commerce Ministry has announced that Vice Premier He Lifeng will be in Sweden from July the 27th to 30th for economic and trade talks with the United States upon mutual agreement. The ministry spokesperson noted that following the important consensus reached during the phone talks between the two heads of states on June the 5th, the two sides will leverage the role of the China-US Economic and Trade Consultation Mechanism. He also highlighted that the two sides will continue to engage in consultations in economic and trade issues of mutual concern based on the principle of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation. For further analysis, we're joined from Hong Kong by economics Benny Kwok, Welcome to Qnews Economic Bulletin, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you with us in today's episode. Sir, given U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's indication that discussions in Sweden will likely focus on extending the August 12th tariff deadline, what are the economic implications for both the United States and Chinese economies of a short-term extension versus a more comprehensive tariff reduction?
Hello, thank you for inviting me. So, I could expect the so-called 12th of August deadline would be extended for maybe a short period of time, so that the United States could show to all over the world, well, that they would like to have a consensus, have a trade deal with China. But of course, such deal, what kinds of deal? We should rather than focus on the so-called the details between United States and China. We should even more look at what United States have the trade deal with other Asian countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, and etc. So at this moment, we know in between the United States and Vietnam, we have the so-called the transshipment so-called penalties on this 40% tariff. At this moment, we just know the United States has also have to deal with them in Indonesia and the Philippines, and with the 19% tariff. But of course, we still have to wait to see much more details on whether there's another also the so-called the transshipment details on charging for the U.S. to ban those trying to impose the transshipment tariff for forcing the Indonesia and the Philippines to put those details on the trade deal. So I would say for the coming meeting in Stockholm of Sweden, rather than just focusing on the trade deal, the trade conflicts between the two countries, I would rather focus on whether the United States is going to pressure China not to buy any more oil the oil from the Iran. But of course, China is going to support Iran at any expense. So it is we could expect it. So that is I would say for this coming meeting, United States is going to test whether how China is going to willing to support Iran, is it in what course China is going to support Iran, not just financially and also
beyond tariffs. What are the realistic win-win economic outcomes of these talks, especially considering U.S. calls for China to reduce manufacturing overcapacity and address its oil purchases from sanctioned countries? And you just mentioned the case of the oil, by the way.
Yes. Okay. First term is I would say United States is now slowly moving out, trying to forcing the China supply chain moving out from China, and so that to try to encourage them to stay on the Southeast Asia, to try to break down the linkage between China and those the Southeast Asian nations, because if they keep those nations, they will be charged for the transshipment tariff. It is the way for the United States try to contain the production power of the China, but it would happen in a very slowly way. Maybe it would take 10 years, 20 years, or even much more longer. And for the problem of the oil, for the issue of the oil, that is I would say, as I've said, that is the United States is trying to test whether China is going to still supporting Iran at any cost. Of course, we know China supports Iran at every moment. What the United States want is to see what China is going to support in what courses, financially, military, or even though is it giving the any nuclear stockpiles or weapons technology, etc. So of course, for the Iran deal, the biggest weapon for the United States is the so-called secondary sanctions. For they would have any sanction policies for any
secondary
countries that buy
sanctions on China or on Iran, sir?
Yes, on of course on China. Of course, sanctioning on Iran is United States is doing over the years, but and now is moving on these secondary sanctions. So of course, United States is targeting China as well.
Okay,
of course,
sir, in 10 seconds, because I have to wrap up and I want to touch this point because it's really important. What are the key economic imbalances the EU seeks to address with China? Example, trade deficit, market access, subsidies, but please in 10 seconds.
Okay, of course, EU doesn't want to have a very bad relations with China, but EU doesn't want China to try to shift its overcapacity goods to the EU as well. So that's why EU also stand very firm on the China overcapacity problems. So and China doesn't want to break the relations with the EU as well. So I would say both EU and China would like to keep the relations, and they would keep discussing. And China is also finding, rather than EU, than trying to finding more maybe global south and other developing markets to try to export its goods, so that to try to ease the pressure from the EU.
Thank you so much, sir. Economics Benny Kwok from Hong Kong. Thank you very much for your insights and your in-depth analysis. Really very much appreciated, sir. Now we move on to the latest developments from all over the world. The European Commission plans to submit counter tariffs on 93 billion euros of US goods from approval to EU members. This comes as the EU primary focus to achieve a negotiated outcome with the United States to avert 30% Trump tariffs that will be imposed on August the 1st. The EU added that it would be in parallel press on with potential countermeasures. It said it would merge its two sets of possible tariffs of 21 billion euros and 72 billion euros into a single list. The United Kingdom's Competition and Markets Authority plans to designate Apple and Google with strategic market status, allowing it to force changes to their mobile platforms. This move aims to increase competition and benefit consumers, businesses, and app developers. Initial focus areas include app store fees, ensuring fairer review processes, and allowing more payment options. Both tech giants have expressed concerns, citing potential impacts on privacy, innovation, and existing business models. Breaches could lead to a fine up to 10% of global turnover. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Jiankong has expressed his country's acknowledgement of India's positive move to resume instituting tourist visas to Chinese nationals. He added that facilitating cross-border travel is in the common interest of all parties. He further highlighted that China is willing to maintain communication and consultation with India to continuously improve the level of convenience in bilateral people-to-people exchanges. Investment Minister Khaled Al-Falih has arrived in Syria, leading a delegation of around 130 Saudi business people. They're expected to finalize deals worth approximately $4 billion, signaling Riyadh's commitment to supporting Syria's recovery efforts. Al-Falih is scheduled to meet with Syrian leadership ahead of a two-day investment conference that opened today. Saudi Arabia has strong interest in Syria's energy, hospitality and airport sectors. The two countries are expected to launch a joint business council to foster bilateral economic cooperation. In commodities sector, oil prices fell for the fourth consecutive session on Wednesday as investors assessed trade developments, including a U.S. tariff deal with Japan ahead of a U.S. talks data announcement. Brent crude futures were down 0.5% at $68.24 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures declined 0.5% at $64.98 per barrel. Moving on to global markets, which are showing a broadly positive trend, with Asian and European indices posting gains and U.S. futures indicating a strong opening. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 led the surge in Asia, jumping over 3.5%, while European benchmarks also saw significant increases. In the United States, S&P 500 futures were up 0.31%. Nasdaq futures rose 0.14% and Dow Jones Industrial Average futures hiked 0.53%. In Europe, the UK's FTSE 100 gained 0.44%. Germany's DAX jumped 0.68% and France's CAC 40 increased 1.42%. In Asia, the Shanghai Composite inched up 0.01%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index gained 1.62% and Japan's Nikkei 225 surged 3.51%. This concludes our economic bulletin. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, via Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.